This is Alex from Apocalypse.Intelligence. What the Epstein files are exposing right now is not only predators. They're also exposing the people who are placed near them to document them, to monitor them, contain them, or simply those just surviving them, while stripping those people of the institutional cover required to explain why they were there. This is the part that almost no one is discussing. When covert officers, embedded witnesses, operators, or even terrified victims are positioned inside of harmful environments and institutions for intelligence, protection, or survival, their proximity has meaning only as long as the structures around them still function. The moment that structure collapses or withdraws, proximity becomes a liability. Their presence near harm is no longer read as placement, it reads as association. And in the current environment, association alone is enough to destroy a career, a reputation, or a legal standing. These people cannot simply just explain themselves. To do so would require disclosing context they are not permitted to disclose, or cannot disclose without extraordinary consequence. Authorization pathways are gone, compromised, or no longer trustworthy in many cases. Chains of command have fractured, especially in the United States and United Kingdom. Protection mechanisms no longer function in the way or methodology in which they were designed. This is a trap. The more effectively someone was embedded, the more dangerous this becomes. The closer they were to harmful actors, the longer they remained, and the more complete their documentation or experience of wrongdoing, the easier it becomes to frame them not as witnesses, but as participants. Effectiveness becomes exposure. Proximity becomes evidence, and the record that would clarify their role is often held in systems they cannot access or cannot safely use while undercover. Illegal obligations do not disappear when institutional cover does. Silence remains binding, especially under NDA, non-disclosure agreements, even when the structure that requires that silence no longer protects them. Internal reporting mechanisms only function if the institution itself still functions. When the structure collapses or is captured, the reporting pathway collapses with it. What remains is silence without protection. This is not limited to trained personnel. Embedded witnesses, operators, and terrified victims caught inside these environments are subject to the same inversion. Those closest to harm and the most able to describe it become the most exposed when the protection disappears. The most credible witness then becomes the most available suspect. And that is injustice. Turning the person who has seen the most, who has survived the most, into the greatest suspect when they themselves are innocent and have been placed into that circumstance in a law enforcement capacity to protect others is abhorrent. What remains is silence without protection. There is a parallel problem happening at the level of the record itself. The public conversation is focused on who appears in Epstein's files. The deeper issue is, the record itself is not fixed. It moves, just like this phone. The Department of Justice has published a mechanism allowing members of the public to request corrections to posted material, and that's generally a good thing. However, the site also states that may be updated as additional documents are identified for release, and remains marked as updated after the initial mass publication of more than 3 million pages on January 30th, 2026. That matters, because once a politically sensitive record remains administratively modifiable after release, it no longer functions as a stable evidentiary archive. It becomes something else. It becomes leverage. What is visible is no longer only a matter of what occurred. It is also a matter of who currently controls the system that determines visibility. And control has shifted. On April 2nd, 2026, President Trump fired Attorney General Pam Bondi and installed his former personal criminal defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, as acting Attorney General. The same department, now administering the Epstein release infrastructure, is now under new leadership installed by a president who appears in those same documents thousands of times. In the United Kingdom, the Epstein files have already forced the resignation of a former senior diplomat from both his political party and the House of Lords, the arrest of a former member of the royal party, and ongoing institutional disruption at the highest levels of British public life at a moment when the monarchy itself is under documented pressure and anticipated transition. These are not isolated events. They are part of the same operational environment. Names can disappear. Redactions can be applied or lifted. Timing can be controlled. This is not an abstract concern. It is documented structure of how the system operates. And public reporting has already raised concerns about instability in the release process, including the exposure of victim information alongside incomplete or inconsistent visibility of powerful actors. A record that moves under pressure is not a record. It is a threat instrument. These two dynamics reinforce each other. People near harm are silenced. The record around that harm is unstable. The result is predictable. The truth exists, but cannot be safely spoken by those closest to it, and cannot be reliably fixed in place. Those bound by duty, survival, or constraint cannot correct what is said about them without destroying something, or sometimes someone, they were required to protect. This is not a bureaucratic accident. It's a feature. It is a structural outcome of the institutional collapse under pressure, and its effect is consistent and predictable. It converts witnesses into targets. The solution is not complicated. Critical records must exist outside compromised chains of command, before pressure is applied, before systems are altered, before authorization pathways disappear, because the record that cannot be modified is the one that was never in their custody in the first place. So please, start recording. If you need help using AI to record your own statements, if you happen to be a victim or someone who is not restrained by NDAs, there are several on my Apocalypse.Intelligence Instagram. So with that being said, Khoda Hafez, Auf Wiedersehen, and Salam Alaikum. May Allah guide us all to the straight pathway always, and grant us discernment, justice, and a brighter future. Amen.